And because the Democratic Party has such a degree of disdain for its own base, you know, the reason I stress that I volunteer with the Democratic Party as part of that coalition, I am the base. I am the kind of voter that the Democratic Party has to appeal to, because my enthusiasm has been rapidly waning for the Democratic campaign. Other people like me, intensely critical of the Democrats. We are the people that the Democrats have to shore up support for. Centrists don't exist. But now that it's about 25 minutes into stream, I'll talk about, I guess, the one prepared thing that I wanted to mention, right? And that is that I believe that well, no, actually, I don't want to even start with that angle. Sorry, you guys don't know my inner thought process, but I do, and I'm commentating it, which makes me sound like a crazy person. But I think I just want to start by talking about the Democratic Party. Crazy. A totally new concept. Nobody's ever heard me say anything about the Democratic Party, positive or negative. This is new. There's a certain trend in election cycles where nearing the general election, the Democrats pivot towards the center. You know, away from whatever milquetoast sort of more progressive, you know, maybe left-adjacent policymaking they would have supported in the primary season or leading up to the general election. Then they start moderating, you know, doing the centrism, bipartisanship shtick, and in this case, making everything about Trump rather than the Republican Party. And especially when it comes to issues about trans people and border politics, immigration politics, the Democrats are making it very difficult for me to support them, right? And when I say support, I don't just mean voting for them. I have voted for the Democratic Party in every election where I was eligible to vote. I voted for them this time. I got my early ballot and voted with that. What I mean is I volunteer. I do phone banking on occasion, or you know, I run phone banks. I've helped to moderate them and stuff. And let me tell you, it is extremely difficult to maintain a sort of positive attitude and good motivation when I'm aware that, like, the Democratic Party is actively at odds with what I want for the world, and in fact, what a lot of people want in America. You know, like, I'm sure, like, most Europeans will probably know instantly what I'm referring to. Like, you go to the polling data on stuff like family leave and Social Security, Medicare, the expansion of healthcare into a single-payer model, unions, wages. Like, a lot of people are in agreement on that stuff, but the Democrats are terminally unwilling to pursue any of it, right? And what that results in is a Democratic Party that sort of ends up compromising as a political strategy that's meant to, like, appeal to a group of people that doesn't exist. And as a result, they almost throw each election that they do this in, right? But yeah, the Democratic Party is behaving in a way that suggests to me that they're more interested in becoming the Republican Party and losing than they are in distinguishing themselves from the Republican Party and winning. And when I say distinguishing themselves from the Republican Party, I mean making it clear that, like, we are not the fucking same. Like, let me tell you, we are worlds apart on this. We disagree with them. And in fact, they are our ideological opponents. The Democrats are stuck in this brain state where they think that they can't disagree with the Republicans on anything. Like, the Democrats, for some reason, presumably because they're civility pilled, are kind of allergic to disagreement. And as a result, that they are ill-suited to perform in politics, because politics is a realm where disagreement is a necessary component of, well, disagreement. You know? Republicans will say some shit like, we want to deport 20 million illegal aliens, whatever. And the Democrats will try to meet them halfway. where it's like, oh, well, we want to build the border wall and deport 1 million. It's like, fucking, okay, great. Again, it's like the 50% Hitler versus 100% Hitler thing. The Democrats are always, like, fighting on ground that the Republicans have picked for them, and as a result, the Republicans will always win, because the contest that they're having is who is better at being Hitler. And the Republicans are always going to be better at that, because they're more ideologically closely aligned with Hitler, with, you know, Nazism. And it doesn't matter how far to the right the Democrats move, that's not the ground that they should be fighting on. But I don't think they understand that, nor do I think they really care to. You know? Get me out of here. We've seen this in other countries too. We saw this in the UK, where the Labour Party ran a centrist campaign, which lost them a lot of support leading up to the election earlier this summer, I believe, and they won the election, but won an embarrassingly small share of the popular vote, and only, like, narrowly, you know, and are now, like, already losing that sort of polling lead, because their whole policy shtick is just, we're the Tories now, you know? I said it in another video where I talked about Labour, and I will say it here. Centrism was a dead-on-arrival strategy when it was first implemented in electoral politics 30 years ago, and it is a dead-on-arrival electoral strategy today. And the difference between then and now is that then I would kind of assume this is more a matter of incompetence on the Democratic Party's end of things. But now I think it's not strictly a matter of incompetence. I think the Democrats know that centrism is a losing strategy. But what I think is going on is that the, you know, campaigns are largely driven by the people that are giving them donation money, right? Like the capital class donates a lot of money to both parties. They, you know, use their wealth to influence politics, and as a result, that influences the party platform. And what is happening right now is that the like political insiders with a lot of wealth in the Democratic Party are effectively saying, hey, we would rather you, like, you know, if you run a left of center campaign in a meaningful sense, like if you run with the progressives, that's bad for us, and we won't be as willing to support you, you know? And so ultimately, the Democratic Party, because they want to maintain the support of their donors, would rather run a centrist campaign and lose than run a progressive campaign and win. Like, the popularity of progressive rhetoric and policies and narratives is such that if the Democrats ran a progressive left campaign, right, and we saw this with Tim Walz and Kamala Harris alluding to very popular political sentiments that were, like, very pronouncedly left of center leading up to the DNC, like before the DNC, if they ran on that platform, the Republicans wouldn't stand a chance, and they would never win another election. The Republicans would never win another election if the Democrats ran to the left. But because the Republicans are beneficial to capital, and because capital is ultimately driving this train, the train of politics in a capitalist system, the Democrats abandoned the winning strategy to pick a strategy that better aligned with the status quo. And that will naturally lead to them losing. You know? The polling data that we have, as devilish as polling is, you know, delightfully devilish, Seymour, but not even delightfully devilish, just devilish. All the polling data available to us, including internal polling from the Democratic and Republican parties, they have access to better polling data than the general public does. The polls for Kamala Harris, you know, support for her political campaign, her and Walz, was going up and up and up, leading up to the DNC, leading up to the Democratic National Convention, and then immediately after the convention, it peaked, and every poll since then has reflected either a peak there or they've been, like, declining since then. You know, they've either stagnated or declined since then. And that tracks perfectly with their strategy changing as well, with the campaign basically changing from the Kamala Harris campaign, you know, with a lot of grassroots staffers, activists, organizers, etc., on the campaign employment list, volunteering lists, and whatnot, to, you know, then the Democratic National Committee taking over the campaign, incorporating it into the Democratic fold, basically, and basically tossing out all of the work of young progressive activists to shoehorn some fucking, like, lich octogenarian consultants that don't know their head from their ass, you know, to run a campaign that has never done any favors to the Democratic Party. You know, they shoved out all of the young AOC aligned progressives, and they shoehorned Bill and Hillary Clinton back into the picture, political figures that have not been relevant for like years and that nobody cares about or even likes. And that is a losing strategy, if ever there was one. Hell, they're barely even running a campaign anymore. I don't know if people have noticed this, but, you know, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, very, very active on social media, on TV, doing rallies and stump speeches and like, pumping out ads with strong progressive campaign messaging. You hardly hear a peep anymore. You know, granted, I follow some of their accounts on social media, so I see what they're up to, but like, they're not getting half the engagement. Like, they're barely getting any engagement, and they're like, all they post about now, because I know that the Democratic consultants have taken over here, all they're posting about is Trump. They've made the entire election about Trump and how mean and boorish he is, which is exactly what Hillary Clinton did in 2016, and it's exactly why Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. And it's not a mistake that Hillary Clinton is actually on the advisory team for this campaign now. You know? And because the Democratic Party has such a degree of disdain for its own base, you know, the reason I stress that I volunteer with the Democratic Party as part of that coalition, I am the base. I am the kind of voter that the Democratic Party has to appeal to, because my enthusiasm has been rapidly waning for the Democratic campaign. Other people like me, intensely critical of the Democrats. We are the people that the Democrats have to shore up support for. Centrists don't exist. The mythical undecided voter is not a meaningful contingent of the voting base. It's low propensity ideological voters, if that makes sense. It's like the people you need to galvanize are not people in the center. They're dumb as fuck median voters who none of any campaign strategy is going to work on anyway, right? What you need to do is appeal to disaffected voters that are already closer to your ideological leanings. It's about motivation and mobilization, not about, like, picking people off of the fence that are in a fence-sitting position. If anybody's fence-sitting at this late of a stage in politics, they're a lost cause. You know? And I will add to that, that even on those terms, progressive campaigning is more effective at appealing to centrist fence-sitters than the, like, fucking dumbass, you know, Trump is mean style of campaigning, right? We saw how even conservative audiences reacted positively to Bernie Sanders in the 2016 election season and in the 2020 election season because he was populist, because he was willing to appeal to very direct interests that affected people's lives, and was willing to use very strong campaign rhetoric about billionaires and like politicians in government. He was willing to be uncivil to a degree that the Democrats are not willing to. Or rather, less civil than the Democrats. Does that make sense? It, like, all this stuff makes it very difficult for me to support the Democratic Party, and I think that's a bad sign for their chances in this election. You know, I've been on record a couple times saying that the Democratic Party has no path to defeat. Like, the Republican Party has no legitimate path to victory in this election. You know, that is to say, a path that isn't cheating. Now, I think because of the Democratic Party's own efforts, they are now that much closer to snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. I think previously I was right to say that with Kamala Harris's prior campaign strategy, Republicans had no shot of winning this election. Now I think because they've pivoted towards the center, Republicans have a shot again, and it is all the Democrats' fault. This is a paramount example of what I mean when I say that the Democrats are going to get us all killed by allowing the Republicans to kill us. Because they're not willing to, like, commit in any meaningful fashion to fighting the Republicans. They're not willing to even acknowledge that there's an ideological divide. You know? In fact, the Democrats, with their border messaging, with some of the anti-trans campaigns they've even been running, they've been oddly eager to stress the fact that they are actually very ideologically similar to the Republicans. You know? Yeah. Yet another tale of the incompetence of the Democratic Party, and to a degree, that incompetence is intentional, right? I mentioned that the, Democratic Party consultants, these insanely out-of-touch octogenarians who still think they're running the Clinton campaign, have taken over. To a degree, they're actually aware of their incompetence, and that's why the Democratic Party is so militant in muscling out progressives, because the progressive rhetoric, the progressive campaigning lines that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz did pre-DNC were so effective that it laid bare how inadequate the efforts of DNC consultants were. The kind of stuff that DNC consultants come up with are on the tier of, yes, she can, and I'm with her, and it's her turn. Those are all the brainchildren of Democratic Party insiders and consultants. That's the best they can come up with. Meanwhile, the very popular and like very mimetic, very catchy sloganeering of the Kamala Harris campaign, we're not going back, Republicans are weird, and all those lines that Tim Walz had to say about neighborliness, those were workshopped, like weren't even workshopped. That was stuff that Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, or even just individual people at their rallies, came up with on the fly. I remember "we're not going back" was an offhand comment as part of it was part of a written speech, but the speech wasn't like workshopped tirelessly for months or whatever. It was just kind of a like on the fly thing, and it had so much mimetic value that people latched onto it, and it became a mass appeal line. And that's exactly why the DNC consultants wanted to get rid of it, because when you can campaign that well with just like the grassroots, that threatens the DNC consultants' job. That threatens their position in politics, because that shows to the whole fucking world that they suck and they're ultimately not necessary. You know? And I think that plays into part of the motivation of why Democrats would rather run a centrist campaign and lose than run a progressive campaign and win. At the, again, at least at the federal level, because then if they run a progressive campaign and win, now the eyeballs of scrutiny from the inside of the Democratic Party are all on the consultants for being shit at their job. You know? Because now the expectation is set, an expectation that the DNC consultants can't and don't want to live up to. You know? But I think I will end it there. I think that's about what I wanted to say about the Democratic Party and why they campaign the way they do. That ultimately, they would rather lose and cede the entire system to fascists because it rocks the boat less than letting socialists and progressives in to do the sort of political campaigning and sloganeering, handing them the reins, handing the left the political reins will guarantee you political victory, but it's more of a threat to capital and the jobs of, wealthy consultants and the bottom line than it would be to simply lose to fascists. And that's what I think we're seeing right now. Cut the segment there. Oh yeah, also, actually, before you end the segment for real, editing me, I did see a video recently as well where Nancy Pelosi and a lot of other higher up, like, Democratic insiders are already preparing the blame game, where despite being, like, extremely active against the left in their campaign, they're already preparing to blame the left if they lose, which again is something that we saw in 2020 when the Democrats ran a centrist campaign, and then leading up to the election when they thought there was a possibility of them losing, preemptively blamed the left and then took all the credit for when they won. You know, despite the fact that the left is the one that does all of the heavy lifting for the Democrats. Or the left is the sort of segment of the coalition that does all the Democratic Party's actual work for them. Anyways, now cut the segment for real. Future me, you know what to do in the editing. Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.